Okay, how's the volume sound for everyone out there in the back? And sometimes the mic wanders away from my mouth, so please like shout out if you can't hear me back there. No, I don't mind. What about folks on Zoom? Can you hear me? Oh, okay. So we're going to start with a land acknowledgement as always. So we respectfully acknowledge that we are located in the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississauga, and Chippewa nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaty First Nations, which also includes Curve Lake, Hiawatha, Alderville, Scugog Island, Rama, Beausoleil, and Georgina Island First Nations. We respectfully acknowledge that the Williams Treaty First Nations have been stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters, and that today remain vigilant over their health and integrity for future generations to come. We are all treaty people. Okay, so first thing on the agenda for our intro here is about our community outreach that the club does. So every year, our board plans various activities sort of in the wider Northumberland community area. And those are for particular causes. Some of them are just purely educational to increase education and our membership. Others are to augment the Willow Beach's profile in the community, sort of raise awareness and our role and what we do here. And increase, yeah, so that kind of thing. So we already have a few activities planned for this year. So our board member, Jenny Jackman, who's here with us tonight, is organizing an Earth Day cleanup at Wesleyville. We did this last year also, and it was a very, very successful event. So please be on the lookout for that one. Participation in Nature Conservancy of Canada's annual Hazel Bird Day. So that's at the Hazel Bird Nature Reserve. That's owned and run by the Nature Conservancy. We usually have a booth there, and we will again this year. And one booth each at the Coburg and Port Hope Farmers Market later in the summer. Another just opportunities to engage various groups in libraries across the county and, again, increase our membership and our outreach. And then any other opportunities as they arise. So up until now, a lot of this has been sort of spearheaded by board members, but we need help as always for these events. So if there's anyone that's willing to or looking for volunteer opportunities, we would very much appreciate some volunteers to help with these various outreach and community events. So if that's something that interests you, please email the Willow Beach sort of the general info email there, or speak directly to Marina, and we'll go from there, and hopefully we get you some information and you can do some volunteering. So with that being said, we have a little bit of a mini presentation to start off with today from Amanda Newell, who's the Executive Director of the Northumberland Land Trust, and she's going to give us a quick 5-minute or so talk about some of the newer properties I think that they've acquired in the last little while. So you want to come up, Amanda? You gotta really hold it up.
Oh, do I? I can't put it in the stand?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay, all right. Last time I was in this room, I had very recently been hired as Northumberland Land Trust Executive Director. And I was asked to do something similar, and I hadn't even started work yet. And I was a little bit nervous, and I'm a bit less nervous now because I feel much more familiar with the land trust and the people. And I'm here just to introduce the land trust to people who are not familiar, but I know that a lot of people in this room are quite familiar with the land trust. Maybe just a show of hands, people who feel like they know lots about the land trust. Yes. So I considered that when I was asked to speak. So I don't want to be too repetitive, but I'll go into some of the details. But first, we have some very special people here tonight who know the land trust quite well. Can you put your hand up if you're a board member and you're here? Hi, Susan and Frank. Oh. Can you put your hand up if you're a land donor? Hi. Amazing. We're just You know, we are a group of people and an organization that is, it only functions because of people who are interested in land donation, interested in land conservation, willing to help finance land conservation, and people who are willing to give a lot of time to stewardship and governance. Without all of the volunteers and the donors and the friends, Northumberland Land Trust couldn't happen. So thank you very much for those of you who are here. The Land Trust has a very close relationship with Willow Beach Field Naturalists. Northumberland Land Trust was actually started by Willow Beach Field Naturalists. And it is an organization that actually merged with Lone Pine Land Trust. So our roots go back earlier even than the early days of NLT. So we're actually celebrating 30 years this year since Lone Pine Land Trust started in 1996. The merger happened in 2001, early 2000s. And at that time, there were, I think, 13 properties, and now we're at 19 with 2 in the works, as you've seen in our media lately. So our 2 new properties are the Apostolides properties and the Ray Blackwell property. They are in the Rosemead and Centerton areas, and they're beautiful places. I've been able to go to both. They have really solid habitats for a lot of species at risk. So that's something we're always interested in protecting. Lots of bird habitat. And we are looking forward to having our biological surveys done. So we have a lot more of a solid idea of what's going on these properties. They will both be open to the public, one of them fully open, so you won't even have to register with us to visit. You'll be able to just drive and park and go for a walk. And yeah, we love giving that sort of opportunity to people because we all need more places to get out in nature. It was a little hard to decide what to talk about because of the demographic of you and how much you already know about the Land Trust. Some of you know more than me. So I did leave a couple brochures at the back. One of them is a general one about us, and another is actually about grassland birds. And I left some cards. So I would really love for you to contact me. One thing that we have as a group wanted to work towards is a closer relationship again with Willow Beach. We owe our existence to this club, so there are so many opportunities for us to work together. And I know that already happens, but I think that there can be more conversations about how we can, come together for the common good. So I think I probably used up my 5 minutes. I would love to take questions, but I was told there's probably not time. So please do contact me if you have any thoughts or questions. I would love to hear from you. And I think I'm supposed to introduce you now, Elizabeth, to come up and do the sightings. Thank you very much.
Okay, there weren't as many exotic things turned up this month as there were the last month, but there were still some interesting things on the what's the first one? Okay, I told you that that the blackbirds would be coming back before I saw you again. Red-winged blackbirds have been in my garden. Have they been in yours? Probably. And then grackle, which is the only time we welcome them because they're a sign of spring, a true sign of spring. Robins are not a true sign of spring. Years ago, in his column in the Globe and Mail, Peter Whalen said that a robin picking out a worm in your garden was a sign of spring, but it wasn't the robin, it was the worm. This is a bird that they saw on the outing on Sunday, and it was in Coburg Harbor. It's a blue goose, of the snow goose. Most of the snow goose migrate much further east than here, mostly up the Ottawa Valley area. But this one happened to be in Cobourg Harbor, along with the outing. I think Roger said that they had, with the entire group, had about 50 species of birds on that day. So this is a representative. Yeah, a couple of them. That's the American widgeon. And this one isn't as common as it used to be. Yeah, canvasback. Thank you, Richard, for the wonderful picture. But that one they saw at Presqu'île, I think. Yeah, and there were thousands of birds at Presqu'île, thousands and thousands. But many of them were far out on the water, so you had to share their spotting scope to see all of them. Yeah. And killers are back. You heard a killer? Keep your ears open. You'll probably hear them. Yeah. And surprisingly, American woodcock appear before the snow is gone. I don't know how they survive because they feed by poking their long beaks into the ground to pick up earthworms. But some of them are back. People have had them back. They must be in, and with the couple of nights now that we've had cold weather, the ground may have frozen up again, so they'll be hard to feed. And several bald eagles were seen on the outing on the weekend, and you can see them in Cobourg Harbor sometimes too. Maybe not as much right now because there's no ice, because they feed on dead things on the ice, but there were lots of them at Presqu'île. American kestrels are coming back. So this is the time when most of the raptors arrive back. There are kestrels, several of them have been seen on the highway between Port Hope and Cobourg on the wires. But they're not the local birds, probably. They're probably still moving through. Yeah. And Richard Pope had this one in his garden. Yeah. That's a wonderful sparrow, fox sparrow. It doesn't breed here, it breeds further north. But they will be accompanied by many other sparrows. White-throated sparrows are beginning to come through. We may find white crowns. So keep your eye out for sparrows in the next, by the end of the month. But before I see you again, it'll be April, and the first warblers will be back. Yeah, but things are moving. So keep your eyes open. In migration, you never know what you'll see where. Yeah. Richard, it's your turn.
See if anybody has any seconds to report.
Oh, yeah. Do you have anybody else have anything? Richard, anything more exciting in your garden? Anything more exciting than the foxsparrow?
Well, not in my yard, the snow geese were exciting and governors and all the birds in our harbor, but they're doing work in the harbor now, so a lot of birds aren't there, but. Early in the morning on the weekend, the harbor's full, like it was the day we got lucky.
Well,
I got all the waterfowl like the blue-winged teal and maybe surf stover.
so if you want to find ducks, go down to the harbor first thing tomorrow morning or Sunday morning when the workmen aren't there, and you might have a chance to see them. Yeah. Wood duck in your ponds?
Yeah.
Wood ducks at Port Britain, lots of them?
Buffalo heads.
Bufflehead on the lake? And hooded mergansers? Yeah.
So Kate on Zoom, she's reporting seeing bluebirds on Monday.
So which?
Kate Hayday reporting bluebirds on Monday.
Kate Hayday reporting bluebirds on Monday. They don't always go away. Some of them hang around for the winter, but maybe they're hanging around the nest boxes and trying to establish a territory now.
And I had a meadowlark on.
Ah, Marina had a meadowlark on Monday. Yeah, Kate.
I heard, but didn't see chipping sparrow, and Merlin heard it too.
Okay.
So,
Chipping sparrow at the harbor?
yes, at the harbor, and there was a song sparrow there. So,
Song sparrows have been all over the place, so
yeah.
keep your ears your ears peeled, you'll be more apt to hear them than see them. Catherine?
Herded sparrows all winter, and one single, song sparrow. And yesterday I saw a cowbird.
Okay, white-throated sparrow and song sparrows for all winter. This is at Welcome. And yesterday she saw a cowbird. So cowbirds are back too. Anybody else have anything exciting to report? Yeah, Vince.
28 swans have come out of the Economy River.
What kind of swans, Vince?
That's more than 2 miles away. I know some of them will be the trumpeters.
Probably weren't mutes. Trumpeters, but tundras are around right now too. So you have to have a really good look at them to,
That's
tell.
far from my office.
yeah, you have to be careful these days because there are a lot more trumpeter swans than there used to be. So you have to you have to really pay attention to your black beach swans because right now at this time of year, they could be a few tundras. Tundra motion is mostly further west than here. They go through in big numbers in the Long Point area on Lake Erie, but there are lots of trumpeters around, so you never know. Yeah, Richard.
Well, 10 days ago, Jerry and I had about 125 tons of announcement. I don't know why they don't. Just east of here,
Talk of trumpeters last week.
hundreds.
Sorry, tundras last week. East of Coburg.
Still evening grosbeaks.
Marina still has evening grosbeaks. If you haven't seen any this winter, come and see her. Yeah. She doesn't mind strange people wandering in her driveway.
Summertime.
Suzanne Williams has had red poles for the last week.
Oh, yeah. Suzanne is at the north side of Cold Springs. And she's had red poles at her feeder. Red poles have not been really common this winter, so yeah, barred owl at Ontario and Clyde Street in Coburg. Because there's an Ontario in Port Hope as well. Yeah. Barred owls have been really abundant this winter. We had one come in and spend an afternoon in our yard in Port Hope. That's the only time we saw him. Or her. Whatever it was. And where were they? Okay, the Hayden Nature Reserve. Lots of barred owls around. Yeah. Okay, I think Richard, you can come now.
Elizabeth? Well, we've had some exciting outings of late. The feeder outing in February or March 1st, which I missed, unfortunately, but there were 6 locations visited. There were 15 folks out checking out the feeders. And I think you saw some fairly exotic birds, winter finches, which was great. And last Sunday, the waterfowl outing starting in Coburg Harbor and going to Presqu'île, led by Roger, and what a wonderful day that was. Wow. The sun, it was supposed to rain most of the morning. We had a little bit of drizzle, then we had some sunshine, and then we had a lot of birds, a lot of waterfowl, unlike last year. So it was really a nice outing. And then 2 days ago, on the 25th, the turtle outing to Peterborough, and what a wonderful day that was. So 25 folks came out for that, and we had 12 people on the waiting list. So we're going to do a repeat on that in September. I've already talked with Lisa at the Turtle Conservation Facility about that. So we'll organize another one for that, for September. And I was totally surprised at some of the information that they passed on to us about the turtles, and there was, I know that the people I talked to were very, very impressed with the facility. So coming up, we have a nature walk coming up in April. We don't have a date for that yet. That will be weather dependent. So watch your emails, and that'll be led by Chris Ito. And on April the 22nd, we have the Earth Day cleanup at Wesleyville. So if you would like to volunteer, it's a great opportunity to get to see the Wesleyville property if you haven't seen it. It's a fun day. It's hard work, but it's also fun. On May the 9th, Hazel Bird Day, and that's going to be led by Chelsea Mark Antonio. And there's a rain date there for May the 16th, that if May the 9th is rained out. We're also going to have a spring ephemeral outing once more this year, and this one is going to be in the west end of the county. Last year we had it in Brighton, and this year we'll have it in West End, Candlestick Woods, and Susan Cassie is going to head that up. And then in May also, date to be announced, we'll be having a warbler walk and other spring migrants, and the leader hasn't been picked for that yet. In June, we've got the Wesleyville bird count, but there will also be the Northumberland bird count as well in June. We haven't got that on the list. So those are events as well. If you would like to participate, by all means, let us know. Let Jenny know about the Wesleyville, and Roger about the Northumberland bird count, which usually is the first weekend in June.
13th and 14th.
13th and 14th of June here. Okay. So get that on your calendar.
It won't be nearly as crazy this year as it was last year.
Was it crazy last year?
Yeah. We took up 22 truckloads and 9 trailer loads. And this year, we're just doing it according to the protocols from the county cleanup. So it's to keep your road allowances and what people can pick up by hand. So we're not picking up, mattresses and driver tires and things like that.
Right.
It won't be more fun.
Less strenuous. Okay, very good. And our next outings meeting will be on Tuesday, May the 5th. So if any of you have a suggestion of an outing that you might want to suggest or participate in, and we haven't seen it on our list, please let me know, or let our other committee members know, Marina, Roger, Brian, and Tom, and Chelsea. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Richard. So it's time to introduce our speaker then for the night. So I'd like to welcome and introduce Dr. Andrew Peregrine. Dr. Peregrine is a veterinarian and clinical parasitologist at the Ontario Veterinary College, University of Guelph. He obtained his DVM and PhD from the University of Glasgow, Scotland. He then worked for 9 years at the International Laboratory for Research on Animal Diseases in Nairobi, Kenya, where he carried out research to improve control of tropical parasites on cattle. Since 1997, he has been an associate professor of tropical parasite. Lost my place here. Associate professor in clinical parasitology at the Ontario Veterinary College, University of Guelph, where he teaches DVM students. In addition to his research interests, currently include emerging parasite infections of animals and people, and sustainable control of parasites in sheep. He is a diplomat of the European Veterinary Parasitology College and the American College of Veterinary Microbiologists. So, with that being said, I'll turn it over to Dr. Peregrine, so he's on Zoom for us for tonight. And yeah, if you want to take it away, Dr. Peregrine.
Okay, thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I'll just share my screen. Let me try it again. For some reason,
So it's coming up.
sorry, for some reason the system it's not recognizing my PowerPoint file anymore, I'm afraid.
Try closing the PowerPoint and opening it again.
Sorry about this, folks.
No problem.
Okay, let me try. Yeah, it's still not, it's not recognizing it now. I don't know why, because it was working earlier on.
Do you know how large the file is? Could you email it to me?
Okay, hang on. That's going to take a while, Marina. Yeah, it's not, your system's not recognizing the file, which has never happened before.
Well, and we tested it earlier and it worked, so.
Yeah, that's weird.
So can you save it as a PDF and show it as a PDF?
Let me try. Do you think it will recognize that?
Maybe, but PDF will be smaller and you could email that to me and I can always open it and.
Yeah, the file's 14 megabytes. Is that too big to email you?
Yeah, I think 12 will be the max. But if you PDF it, it'll be a smaller size.
Yeah, sorry, that's going to cause problems because I've staged a lot of my okay, I can do it. It's.
Well, you can try emailing me the PDF. I'm just not sure it'll go through.
Yeah.
Or Dropbox. I'll just get somebody here to sing and dance for a minute while.
Yeah, sorry, it's. I tell you what, I'm going to leave the meeting and come back in again.
All right.
And see if that works.
Yep, that probably will work.
Yes. Oh.
Yeah.
Amanda says that you can take questions. It's not on.
What thing is if it's.
Amanda says that you can take questions on the land trust.
Oh.
Does anybody have questions or stories or ideas that they can share while we wait? Anybody at all?
I just have a question.
Yes, Harriet.
Which is, I think it's really nice that you come to join us again this evening and keep that link going. But you know, as you've taken on a property of the autonomy, and it's only reachable by water.
Yes.
I'm wondering if you're going to be making that available for people who have any access.
Yes, so it's not going to be considered publicly open, but we will hold events where people will be able to register and come with a guide. And we will somehow get people across the water safely. So that'll be great. it'll be exciting. I think people are really excited to see landscape. I've actually only seen it from the shore. I've not been on it myself, so I'm really looking forward to that. I can tell you a little bit about some of the projects we're working on. So, one of the things that my friend and board member Frank and I are both very interested in is supporting private landowners in their conservation efforts. So before I came to Northumberland Land Trust, I worked for Kawartha Land Trust, and I managed a program there called Partners in Conservation. And I worked with over 100 landowners to do conservation work on over 11,000 acres. So it's a pretty neat way to augment what land trusts do, because as I'm sure many of you are, landowners who are interested in conservation, but not in a position to donate your land for whatever reason. Sometimes people are very interested in conservation, but they don't have, this is maybe not so much for this crew, but they maybe need a little bit of guidance or a little bit of help figuring out where the resources are, a little bit of advice, sometimes a little bit of help with some sort of grant proposal or a letter of support. And those are the things that I did with landowners at my previous job. And so Frank and I are going to be developing this program in very, very small baby steps, because NLT only has 2 staff members and we already don't have enough time for the work that we have to do. But as we gain capacity, we're going to be developing a program that allows us to help people like you who are interested in conservation, but just maybe need a little bit of support. So one of the things that we're going to be doing is just talking to landowners, whether you're interested in the program personally or not, and just saying, if you're interested in conservation, what are some of the things that slow you down? We're in a position in society where we need a lot of conservation to happen really fast. And so the land trust is focusing on acquisitions and stewardship, but we also want to focus on connectivity, and it's just not possible for us to protect enough land to truly reach the connectivity that we need in Northumberland without private landowners also doing the work. And a lot of you are already doing the work. So we would love to be informed about that, and that helps inform our decision making. So be on the lookout over the next few years. I don't want to make any promises, but you know, Frank, I don't know, I think he can make stuff happen pretty fast, so we'll see how it goes. So that's one really exciting thing that I personally am really passionate about that will get going. Just let me know when I need to stop.
Yeah, he's back.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Peregrine?
Yeah, it's, can you, can you stop sharing your, can you take down your screen?
I am not sharing right now.
So you're not?
Nope.
So I've come back and it still doesn't recognize my file.
What's the message?
I've just emailed you the file.
Okay. Looks like I've got it.
Sorry about this.
Okay. Okay, so it's in a PDF, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. I've got it open. Share momentarily.
Let me see that.
Okay. All right, so let's. Okay, so you'll just have to cue me when you want me to change slides.
Okay, I've staged the slides, so there's going to be a lot of me asking that. Sorry about this. I don't know what happened.
Okay.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Just as a bit of a background, I teach at the Ontario Vet College, and when I first came to Canada, my predecessor told me, when I asked them, do you need to teach vet students about ticks? They said, no, you don't need to bother about that. What I want to talk about is what has happened since that time when I came in 1997. Can you just go to the next slide? What I want to talk about, number one, is what are the ticks that we see today on dogs and people in Ontario, and what do they transmit or not transmit? By far, the most important tick-borne disease for people and our pets is Lyme disease. So I want to make sure you're familiar with what that looks like. And I want to particularly tell you the extent to which the risk of Lyme disease has been changing over the last 20, 25 years, and to what extent it's going to change in the years in the future. And much of what is going to drive the risk is the role that wildlife play in establishment of the tick and transmission of the bug that causes Lyme disease. And I wanted to finish by talking about the things you and I can do to reduce the risk of Lyme disease. Next, please. The obvious question I quite often get is it important to identify the tick? If I asked you, how do you know this is a tick? This is looking at the ear of a dog in Guelph. And the easy answer is if you can see it with your eyes and there are 4 pairs of legs, it has to be a tick. This is one that's just attached to the dog. When I first came to Canada 25 years ago, there really was only one tick in Ontario. And at that point, you really didn't need to be able to differentiate anything because there was nothing else. However, something's changed dramatically since that time. Next slide. If you look in the textbooks, as far as what are the ticks you can find on people and our pets across North America, there's this long list. The common name of the tick is on the left, the scientific name is on the right. But what I've indicated in the blue arrows are the 2 ticks we see today in Southern Ontario. The American dog tick was always here. It's been in Ontario for at least a century or so. It's the deer tick, or Ixodes scapularis, that's the new tick on the block and the one of particular concern. Next slide. Often people ask me, are there any other new ticks that are going to come in? And there are really 2 that are on the horizon that people are watching for at the moment. One is the Lone Star tick, which you'll appreciate with that name should be in Texas. But over the last few decades, it's spread right up the whole of the eastern side of the US. It's in New York State. So that might be the next one. Next. The other tick that we're increasingly concerned about is a tick that first appeared in North America in 2017. The Asian longhorn tick, first identified in 2017. It had to have come in from somewhere in Southeast Asia. And since 2017, it's spread right throughout the whole of the northeastern part of the US. It's in at least 30 US states. So that could be the next one. Next. As far as the question I was going to ask you is, what are the ticks that we find on pets and ourselves today in Ontario, and how do you identify them? So focus on the picture on the left. The easy way to differentiate the 2 ticks we have today is to look at the plate that's pointed to with that bright blue arrow and ask yourself, is that plate all dark brown or multicolored? I think you can see quite clearly on the tick on the left, that is multicolored, and that is the American dog tick. And until very recently, that was a really good tick because it didn't transmit anything in Canada. It was essentially a clean tick, but just in the last 12 months or so, there's a little outbreak happened of Rocky Mountain spotted fever in the Long Point, Lake Erie area, and it's been associated with that tick, but that is brand new. Everywhere else we find that tick, it's a clean tick. It's the tick on the right that's the new tick that's the particular concern. And if you look at the plate or the scutum that's pointed to by the blue arrow, that's all dark brown. And that tells you straight away that's the deer tick or Ixodes scapularis. and that transmits the bug that causes Lyme disease. It's a bacteria called Borrelia burgdorferi, and the disease it causes is what you and I know as Lyme disease. Next slide. What is Borrelia burgdorferi, the cause of Lyme disease? It's just a bacteria, and this is an image of that under an electron microscope. Next slide, please. It gets its name, the name Lyme disease comes actually from where it was first diagnosed, and that's in an area called Lyme in Connecticut. It could have been called Willow Beach, but they beat us to it. I think one of the obvious questions is, do you always become sick if you get infected with the bacteria that causes Lyme disease? And that only happens when the deer tick feeds on you or animals. And the answer to the question is, what's the risk of you becoming sick if you get infected? Very much depends on what you are. As far as people are concerned, the vast majority of people that get infected become sick. Cats, completely the opposite. Cats are incredibly resistant to Borrelia burgdorferi. They get infected if they go outside, but they never become sick. Most people, though, do become sick. And dogs are somewhere in between. About 10% of dogs that get infected actually develop Lyme disease or sickness. Next slide. So the obvious question is, what do these ticks look like, and how do you identify them when they are fully engorged? This is an ear of another dog in Guelph, and this shows a fully engorged tick on a dog. Next slide, please. If you look at this image, I'm pointing to the plate or the scutum. The body has greatly expanded in this tick because it's been feeding on blood, but the plate or the scutum is there. And if I was with you, I would ask you, what is this? Hopefully you can see that plate or scutum is multicolored. So this is the deer. So this is the American dog tick, Dermacentor variabilis. There's no risk of Lyme disease because this is not the tick that transmits that. Next image. Here's a tick actually out of the Toronto area off a dog. This tick is well fed. And if you look at the plate or the scutum of that, you can see it's all dark brown. That's the deer tick. And it is pretty easy to differentiate the two ticks if you can see that scutum. And if you can't see it with your eyes, there's a lot of low magnification lenses you can get that really helps. Next slide. I want to focus on this new tick in Ontario over the last 25 years, because prior to 1997, the only place in all of Canada where this tick occurred actually was Long Point and Lake Erie. It wasn't anywhere else. It's called Ixodes scapularis, the deer or blackleg tick. And the two images here are both unfed ticks. The one on the right shows you a tick that's crawled up at the blade of a grass, and you can see its front legs are protruding beyond the tick. It's called questing, and it's literally waiting for you or an animal to walk by so it can transfer to us. So typically, if you're walking through the bush, they will attach somewhere on the lower half, typically, of our legs. Now, I mentioned the biggest concern with this tick, the deer tick, is the bug that causes Lyme disease. It also transmits another bug called Anaplasma phagocytophilum that causes infections in both people and pets. It used to be relatively uncommon in Ontario. It's becoming more common, but by far the biggest concern with this tick is the bug that causes Lyme disease. Next, please. I think one of the obvious questions is, this tick has come into Ontario, and over the last 25 years, the distribution has been changing dramatically. Where is it going to spread to? And to answer that, you need to understand the typical life cycle of this tick, and it involves multiple wildlife species. If you don't have all these wildlife species, the tick effectively can't establish. Adult ticks are found primarily on white-tailed deer. They feed on white-tailed deer for blood. And then once they're fully fed, they drop off into the environment. Next slide, please. You'll see the arrows now move to the adult tick that's dropped off into the environment. And if the tick drops off in an area of the bush, typically brush or grass associated with deciduous forests, at the base of the grass, the humidity is ideal for the laid eggs to develop and hatch. I think what's really important to appreciate, if the mother tick is infected with the bug that causes Lyme disease, none of her eggs or her offspring are infected. So the obvious question is, well, how do they get infected? And that's all driven by what happens next. Next slide. What happens eventually, those eggs in the grass, typically on the edges of deciduous or within deciduous forests, the eggs hatch and a tiny immature tick called a larva hatches out of those eggs. And what happens? They need to feed on blood. And their primary source of blood is typically wild rodents, but especially white-footed mice. And the significance of that is they need the blood to mature, but in the blood of the mouse is the bacteria that causes Lyme disease. It circulates in the blood of wild rodents, typically doesn't make them sick, but when the tick feeds on the blood from the rodent, it ingests not only the blood, but the bacteria that causes Lyme disease. And once the tick gets infected, it remains infected for the rest of life. So when the larva is fully fed, it drops off into the environment. Next slide, please. It then molts to what's called a nymph, and that typically is in the same environment, base of grass, on the edges of deciduous forests. It needs to feed on blood. And just like the larvae, it also feeds on wild rodents, especially white-footed mice. So if the larva didn't get infected with the bug that causes Lyme disease, the nymph often does. Once it's fully fed, it drops off into the environment. It then molts into an immature adult. Next slide, please. And it's typically the adults that we see on ourselves or our pets, but they prefer preferentially to feed on white-tailed deer. Next slide, please. Just to give you some idea of size, if you look at the size of the larva, I think you'll appreciate, essentially you'll never see it. We never do see them because they're really only feeding on wild rodents. You can see an image of a nymph. Whilst they do feed on rodents, they also do feed on people, and they are one of the two life cycle stages that's associated with the risk of Lyme disease in people. The adults are bigger in size, and certainly they're responsible for many of the cases of Lyme disease, and they're typically the ones we more readily recognize. Next slide, please. I just want to summarize the different species that you find immature, so the larvae, the nymphs, and the adult ticks, just so that you have an idea of what needs to be in the environment for the tick to establish and for the ticks to get infected. As I said, both the larvae and the nymphs particularly feed on wild rodents. But you'll notice on the slide that both larvae and nymphs also feed on birds. And that is incredibly important when it comes to understanding one of the drivers for the change in distribution of this tick and the bug that causes Lyme disease. Because when larvae or nymphs feed on birds, so this is ground-dwelling birds typically, they're feeding on them for blood. And once the bird takes off, literally those larvae and the nymphs go with them because they remain attached for many days. And this is the time of the year when large numbers of larvae and nymphs come into Canada literally on the backs of birds that have migrated up to southern Ontario from the northeastern regions of the US. So bird migration is really important. The adults, as I mentioned, preferentially feed on white-tailed deer, and often the more deer you have in an area, the greater the chance that the tick can establish and really reproduce. I mentioned the perfect habitat for these ticks is bush and grass on the edge of deciduous forests. Next slide. So these are some images of the typical ideal habitat for the tick. And remember, the ticks typically will walk up the blades of grass waiting for you to pass by so they can attach to you. So if you look at the picture at the bottom on the left, you can see a hiking trail. If you walk right down the middle of that, you won't come in contact with ticks. But as soon as you walk out into the bush grass area, you're going into their territory and they're literally waiting for you. Next slide. I think one of the obvious questions is, when in the year do we see these ticks? And this is a graph that for every month of the year shows you how many ticks Public Health Ontario received in 2018. And so the higher the green bar, the more ticks they received. So you can see in March is typically when we first start seeing these ticks. The peak in the environment usually is in May. They then disappear, the adults, by about June. and then you see them again for a 3-month period in the fall. It's actually the ticks in the fall that are the newly developed adults in the environment, and the ones that don't feed in the fall survive the winter under the snow. And what we see at this time of the year are adults literally that have reemerged from the ground under snow. So there's typically a 3-month period in the spring and the fall when we see the adult ticks, but the nymphs are typically present right throughout the summer months. Next slide. So what influences the risk of exposure? Next slide, please. Well, number one, are you going into their environment? And what drives the answer to that question is, where is this tick established? Next slide. This shows you an image of Canada that was put together by the Public Health Agency of Canada. And back, as I said, in the early 1990s, the only place in all of Canada where the deer tick occurred was Long Point on Lake Erie, which is what the red arrow shows. Ever since then, the Public Health Agency of Canada has been very concerned about where is this tick establishing. And so they historically have collected data every year. And this shows you the map for documented ticks in 2008. So that's only about 10 years later. You can see there's a little hotspot in southern Manitoba. They're right throughout southern Ontario, southern Quebec, and throughout the Maritimes. Next slide. But very much the southern parts of those provinces. It's very important when you see a tick in an area to know whether, is this a new tick that we've never had in this area before, or has it been established and endemic for many years? Adventitious ticks are ticks that have just fallen off migrating birds, and most of them don't establish. So if you're in a part of Canada that's never had this tick and you first see it, typically that's an adventitious tick. And if that's the case, the risk of Lyme disease is very, very low. But if they're established in your area for a long time, the longer they've been in your area, the more likely are the ticks are to be infected. Next slide, please. Just to drive that home, the blue arrow points to a few red spots in Alberta. And to the present day, all the ticks that are ever found there are adventitious ticks. So they've dropped off migrating birds, and the risk of Lyme disease is really low. But that's very different if you come to our neck of the woods. Next slide, please. This is a map from 2017 from Public Health Ontario, and it shows for 2017 in the yellowy orange areas where the tick was recognized to have established and to be actively breeding. Just as a reminder, the red arrow points to Long Point, where this tick has always been. All the other areas are where the tick is established since the early 1990s. I put a circle on this map just so that you keep focused on the area where I think you're located. That's 2017. Next slide, which is 2019. You can see the risk area has significantly increased in our area, right around the GTA and the Golden Horseshoe area, but it's also increasing in other areas, especially in Eastern Ontario. That's 2019. Next slide. This is 2021. Next slide is 2024. So that's 2024. Next slide goes back to 2017. Let me then take you forward to 2024. Thanks. You can see the distribution has changed dramatically in a very, very short period. So the risk, so if you go into these areas now, over time, more and more ticks are getting infected. Next slide. So where you live and where you travel to in Southern Ontario very much drives the risk of exposure to the tick and the risk of Lyme disease. Now, one of the obvious questions is, well, where have all the ticks come from and what are the drivers for the things we're seeing? Well, one of the most important things to appreciate is what has been happening in the US, especially over the last 25 years. This is a map of the US from 2001, where every blue dot shows you a diagnosed case of Lyme disease in people. And you can see the vast majority of all the cases are on the northeastern seaboard of the US, Connecticut, New Jersey, New Hampshire, and other areas nearby. About 10% of all the cases of Lyme disease are in a little hotspot to the west of the Great Lakes. I want to take you forward now to 2019. You can see there's been a dramatic increase in the number of human diagnoses in both of the areas I just mentioned, both the northeastern part of the US and that area just to the west of the Great Lakes. Now, you may say, isn't a lot of that because there's better diagnosis? That's probably true, but it doesn't explain the dramatic increase in the number of cases. And what's important to appreciate, it's that area on the northeastern part of the US is where a lot of ticks come into Canada every year. But what has been happening is more and more ticks have been, because you can obviously say, well, birds have always been migrating from that region, and that's true. But what has changed is the number of ticks in that region and the number of ticks that are infected, because more and more ticks have been coming in on birds over the years, and more of those ticks are infected, which has maximized the chance of the tick establishing here. Next slide. So what's driving this change in distribution? Bird migration, certainly changes in deer population, and reforestation actually increases the typical deer population in areas. And climate change is also a major driver for what's currently going on. Next slide. Okay, unfortunately, we've lost the staging on this slide. That's happened because I've converted it to a PDF file. But what I wanted to show, do you see the area on that map in red? That shows you what is predicted for 2080 is the perfect environmental suitability for the deer tick. That's perfect humidity, perfect temperature. Back in 2000, almost none of Southern Ontario was a perfect climate. But that is what is predicted to change over the coming years and is very much consistent with where we're seeing the tick spread to. But just remember, for the tick to establish, not only do you need the right temperature and humidity, you need the right environmental conditions. So for instance, if you have the right temperature and humidity, but you only walk around a parking lot, you won't come in contact with any ticks. Next slide. So to what extent is the risk of Lyme disease increasing? Well, one of the drivers is the distribution of the tick. The other is driving the risk is not only the distribution of the ticks, but how many ticks are in an area. Because the more ticks are in an area, the more likely you and I are to get fed on by a tick. But something else is changing as well. Next slide. What changes over time, and I've already mentioned this, is that once the tick is established in your area, the longer it's in your area, the more likely it is to be infected. And these are some data from Public Health Ontario, and you can see the blue arrow at the top points to the year 2007. And back then, when this was a relatively new tick, about 7.5% of all the ticks were positive for the bacteria Borrelia burgdorferi that causes Lyme disease. But just look to the bottom of that table, just 6 or 7 years later, by 2013, just over 18% of the ticks were infected. And as a rule of thumb, for ticks new in your area, typically no more than 5% of the ticks are infected. But years later, many of them can be infected. And I thought I'd show you some summary figures on the next slide. So this just shows you overall throughout Ontario back in 2013, on average, as I just mentioned, just over 18% of the ticks were infected. Next slide. If you visited Kingston, though, where the tick has been a significant period now, this is back in 2019, on average, a third of the ticks there were infected. Next slide. If you go to Murphy's Point Provincial Park, and that's roughly halfway between Kingston and Ottawa, about 80% of the ticks there are infected. It appears to be a perfect environment for the tick. You might think Long Point would have the greatest proportion of infected ticks, but that's not actually true. Next slide. There, on average, about 2/3 of the ticks are infected. So if you visit Long Point and you pull 3 ticks off you, all right, it's very likely 2 of those ticks were infected. Next slide, please. What's the evidence the risk of infection in people in Ontario is changing? Well, we have a lot of evidence now because for the last 10 years, this has been a reportable infection in people in Ontario. Next slide. So physicians are legally obliged to report it. What typically does Lyme disease look like? Well, the classic presentation initially in the first 1 to 2 weeks after an infected tick has fed on a person is a large circular red rash where the tick has been feeding. By definition, it's a large red rash that's greater than 5 centimeters in diameter, and it develops on anywhere up to about 80% of people, somewhere between 1 and 2 weeks after the tick has fed. So this isn't like your average bug bite that occurs almost immediately and is much smaller than that. This develops much later and is much larger and is where the bacteria first localizes. After the skin, the bacteria typically progresses to the muscles or joints and causes muscle or joint ache. And at that stage of infections typically are very easy to treat with antibiotics. However, if they're not treated at that stage, you can get severe complications in people. Next slide, please. This shows you the number of human cases that have been diagnosed in Ontario from 2013 through to 2022. And you can see back in 2013 on the left, there were about 300 people diagnosed. 2022, it was just above 1,400 people. Shortly before I spoke to you, I had a look at the Public Health Ontario website for the human cases diagnosed in 2025. It was 2,930. So in the last 3 or 4 years, the number of human cases has doubled in Ontario. Next slide, please. I think one of the very interesting bits from the human data is to look at when most human cases of Lyme disease are diagnosed. This shows you the data for 2017 on the left, January to December on the right, and the higher the green bar, the greater the number of human cases. And if you look at that, and if I asked you when are most human cases diagnosed, they're typically diagnosed midsummer in July. And if you remember from the previous slide, most people will actually get infected within a month of getting diagnosed, because the skin lesions develop 1 to 2 weeks after the tick has fed. And at that point, people are most likely to go to their physician. So most cases are diagnosed in July. So most people get infected typically in June overall. Next slide, please. So one of the obvious questions, and I should warn you, I was going to give you a final exam at the end of this, and you'll see why in a few minutes. But the questions I often get when people bring ticks to me is, is my dog going to get Lyme disease? And it's based on a number of important facts that we have to appreciate. Number one, is it the correct tick? And so if you look at this tick, I think if you look at that plate or scutum behind the mouth parts, you can see it's all dark brown. So this is the right tick. But the next question to ask is, has the tick fed or not? And that is really, really important, because it's only well-fed ticks that actually are able to transmit the bug that causes Lyme disease. Next slide. On average, it typically takes at least 36 hours of feeding on you or your pets before the tick transmits the bug that causes Lyme disease. So if you do take daily tick checks and remove ticks daily off yourself or your pets, you can eliminate the risk of Lyme disease ever occurring. So is it the right tick? Has it fed long enough? And then the last question is, what's the chance that tick is actually infected? And I've already given you those figures. Next slide, please. I think one of the obvious questions is, going forward, things are obviously going to change, and things are obviously, I think in many areas, going to get a lot worse. If you want some perspective on what it really is like to live with these ticks, in a way that doesn't ruin your activities in the environment, go to Connecticut on holiday during tick season. They've had the tick, they've had Lyme disease a lot longer than us. So for your dog, what can you do? Well, number one, I'd encourage you to take your dog to your vet. There are lots of really good tick products that you now can give to dogs. They work incredibly well. And you should always be using tick products on your dogs if they go out into tick areas. And you should also discuss with your vet whether using, in addition, a vaccine for Lyme disease, whether that's appropriate for your dog. So Lyme vaccines, we have them for dogs. They're not perfect. You use them in addition to a tick product. Sadly, at the moment, we don't have any Lyme vaccines for people. However, there is something potentially on the environment on the horizon that's very promising. So in addition to using tick products and potentially vaccine for Lyme disease in dogs, the best thing you can do every night when you're watching the TV is do a tick check on your dog and remove those ticks before they've fed long enough to transmit the bug that causes Lyme disease. Next slide. What about people? Well, if you read the textbooks, I put a quote here: be cautious walking in woods, avoid bushy and grassy areas, which isn't exactly practical. I think we have to start learning to live with the ticks and do things to stop them feeding on us. So number one, particularly wear long pants and tuck those pants into your socks. And the reason for that is because if you're wearing long pants and they're tucked in, when you walk through the bush, the ticks attach first to your long pants. They're looking for skin, and so they typically then start walking up the edge of your pants, all right? And they will keep walking upwards until they hit skin. You'll see the textbooks also say wear long sleeve shirts. I think that's only relevant if you're lying in the bush. So wearing long pants certainly is helpful, but you can apply various compounds to your skin and your clothes that stop ticks attaching. And these are repellent products such as DEET. So you can spray DEET on your clothes or your skin, particularly on your legs, for instance, if it's hot. And then when you walk through the bush, literally it stops the tick attaching to you. There is one very strong repellent that you can buy that you apply to clothes. It's called permethrin. I know you can buy permethrin impregnated clothes at some of the stores. Just note, permethrin is very toxic for cats. So I would encourage you not to use that if you have cats in your household. And then every day after you've been walking, check yourself for ticks. You're most likely to find them in the scalp, armpits, or the groin. What I would say is if you are showering daily, you're actually doing a daily tick check without appreciating it. And I speak from firsthand experience living in Kenya, where 3 times I found a fully engorged tick on me, and I found them every time when I was showering. Because the reality is we don't appreciate it, but we actually know from showering where our lumps and bumps are and where they're not. And all 3 ticks that I found, I was showering, thought I'd hit a mole when I was showering, and lo and behold, wasn't a mole. It wasn't a new mole. It was a tick that was attached. If you find an attached tick, the best way to remove it, if you're comfortable doing that, is to grab the tick, as it shows at the bottom on the right, as near to the skin as possible, and slowly pull it out away from the skin. Next slide. So I was going to finish with a few slides, effectively like a final exam. And here's a question for you. Will I get Lyme disease from this tick?
No.
Oh, you're well done. You're doing better than the vet students. I think you can see this is not the deer tick. You can see the plate or the scutum is multicolored. So it's not the right tick, and the tick hasn't even fed. Next slide. Will I get Lyme disease from this tick?
Yeah. Well, maybe.
So is it the right tick? Yes, it is the right tick. It just hasn't fed yet. All right. So, but it is the right tick. Next slide. Will I get Lyme disease from this tick? So the correct answer is possibly, because number one, is it the right tick? Yes. All right. It's a deer tick. You can see that from the brown plate or the scutum. Has it fed long enough? Absolutely. I think if it fed any more, it would burst. So it's been feeding for at least 36 hours. Is it infected? I don't know. All right. That's the only unknown here. But if you ever have concerns about ticks feeding on you or your pets, go to your physician or your vet. Next slide. So hopefully that's helped you understand what's going on and how things are going to change. The risk of the deer tick and Lyme disease is changing dramatically across southern Ontario. The other tick we see, Dermacentor variabilis, the American dog tick, typically has been a clean tick, but just this past year, as I mentioned, on Long Point, we've had an outbreak of Rocky Mountain spotted fever. We don't know what's going to happen to the distribution of that, so watch this space. The risk of exposure very much depends on our lifestyle. But if we're in tick environments, there's many things you can do, particularly daily tick checks, that can greatly reduce the risk of Lyme disease and other tick-borne diseases. Next slide. I'd just like to thank these individuals that did share some data for this talk. Next slide. Thanks very much. And I apologize that my slides didn't work, but Marina, you've done an amazing job animating them for me. Thank you. Are there any questions?
I'm sure there's questions. Oh, all the hands are going up. Hold on. That's
So how should I do this? Should I give you the mic?
Yeah, I think give them the mic.
Yeah.
Just moving the mic to the part of the room where just the question.
Yeah, what's the best device for removing these ticks? Like, probably not your fingers.
So number one, don't use your fingers. And ideally, if you're removing a tick, wear gloves. Because one of the concerns is if you burst a tick whilst you're removing it, if it's infected, the bacteria could get on the skin of your hands. And if you have an open wound, potentially you might get infected that way. But there are, if you go into the various stores, I know vets and often physicians do have, or the public health folks do have tick removal devices. They're cheap little devices that you literally sort of hook under the mouth parts and slowly pull out the tick. The whole idea is to try and not break the tick whilst you do it. And many of the devices are developed so they work extremely well to pull everything out.
You can buy them at the drugstore.
Yes.
Next question.
If you get bitten by one of the nymphs or get a nymph on you, like I did last year, they're very, very small. As you pointed out, they're very the size of the head of a pin. You can't see them very well. How can you tell which kind of a nymph it is?
Yes.
Do you need to put a magnifying glass on, or can you tell even then?
So if you've got a magnifying glass, in fact, they look very similar. They're just very small. You're right. And that's why a good number of people actually never, because all the data is at least 50% of people get Lyme disease from nymphs. And a lot of people never see the nymph. But if you do see something tiny, if you've got any magnification, you should be able to identify it exactly as we identify the adults. And, and I think if there's any concern, I know today in Ontario, you don't have to go to your physician to get the antibiotic to treat the very early stages of infection. You can go to the pharmacy and they're allowed to give you, what my understanding is, 1 dose of an antibiotic, which kills infections in the very early stage. Sorry.
If you don't get it in that first early period, you have to then get a physician. That could happen to me. I didn't see the bullseye for a while, and then it was about a week afterwards. And at that point, they couldn't give me this one you could just get without a doctor, and I had to get a prescription. Is that the norm?
Yes, because after a few days, so the pharmacists are allowed to give 1 dose of an antibiotic, but that only works in the very first few days of infection. Once the infection has been there for more than a few days, so for instance, the typical skin rashes that you just described develop 1 to 2 weeks after an infection. At that point, you need to give many days, multiple days of an antibiotic treatment. And so that's why you have to see the physician for that. But if you go through that treatment protocol, it does work very well. It's if it's left and allowed to progress further around the body, it can become much worse.
We have a couple of questions in the chat. The first question is, are there any particular risks associated with reinfection?
Well, you certainly can get, we don't seem to develop good immunity, so you can get reinfected. But by the way, sorry, I forgot to tell you about the most exciting development for human Lyme disease. I mentioned that we have a bunch of Lyme disease vaccines for dogs, and at the moment, we actually don't have any vaccines for people. However, there is currently a very large field trial occurring in Eastern Ontario on a Lyme vaccine produced, I think, by Pfizer for use in people. It's a very large trial, which indicates it's got through all the safety trials, and now they're evaluating efficacy. So keep your fingers crossed, because if that becomes available, I think it becomes a game changer for many people that have a concern.
So there's another question in the chat that says, where can you get information about infection rates at places you might visit, e.g. Murphy Point?
I tell you what, I think you've got it. Can you just so there's two sites I would suggest you look at. Public Health Ontario has a reasonably good website that shows you the proportion of infected ticks. Are you able to advance the slides, Marina?
Yeah.
So just keep going until I tell you to stop. Keep going. This one. Okay, well, no, just go back one. There, okay. This is a web. I realize you're people, and now I'm showing you what is actually dog data. But dogs are a very good indicator of the risk of Lyme disease in different parts of Ontario. This is actually a website. It's actually from an organization in the US. Please don't ask why they have Canadian data, but anyway, they do. All right. It's called capcvet.org/maps. And if you go into that website, initially you'll see the US maps, but if you click on the Canada maps, you can actually click on Southern Ontario. So you can see here, I've expanded the map. And if you click on any one of those little areas that you can see on the map, it'll tell you what proportion of the tested dogs are testing positive. And that's a good indication of the risk in any given area. And just so that you know, there's about 1 million dogs being tested every year. About 500,000 dogs in Southern Ontario are tested right across Ontario. So it's actually a very good website for looking at and you can get actual current data, like for this month, if you want, Marina. So that is a very useful resource that indicates how data and risk is changing over time.
Yes, I have a question. How important is the white-footed mouse? Is it a necessary component of the life cycle? And if it is, does the distribution of the mouse control the distribution of the Lyme disease?
So the white-footed mouse is very important, but the bacteria does infect other rodents as well. But it seems to be most commonly found in white-footed mice. So the more you have of those in your area, the more likely ticks are to be infected. Having said that, there is a park in New York. You would think from what I said about the life cycle that you need deer and white-footed mice for the life cycle to be successful. There's a park in New York where there are no deer, but there are mice. All right. And the tick has established there and is very successful, even when there's no white-tailed deer. And the reason is not only do they have white-footed mice, but they have rats that the ticks have learnt as adults to feed on. So the wild rodents are really important. You also need deer for the tick to really establish. But even in the absence of deer, if you have the rodents, you can sometimes see the tick establish and get infected. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it helped. There's a question at the back, Matt. Brad's got a question.
Can you comment on the portion of cases where you don't get a bullseye, but yet you can be infected?
Yeah, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, did you say what proportion of people don't develop a skin lesion but still develop Lyme disease? Is that the question?
Yes.
Yeah, if one of the slides I showed you the bullseye lesion, it's no more than 80%. I think the usual figure is somewhere between about 60 and 80% of people develop a skin lesion. So at least 20% of people don't. And what happens after the skin lesion? After the skin lesion, usually you develop flu-like signs or symptoms. And so if you've got what you think is flu midsummer, it's not likely to be flu. Go to your physician and talk to them about that.
property where we always are seeing ticks, the odd single one here, when walking the dog. However, last fall, I ended up with 14 to 16 ticks on myself, on my body and clothes, and ended up going to the hospital because my legs were weakened. And at the hospital, I threw up. I vomited twice. They tested me for Lyme disease and flu, but said that it was negative. I didn't have either. So I'm wondering, is there some other disease or illness that you can get from the ticks? And my other question is, how do they survive the winter? Do they go under the soil, or how do they survive? And is there another disease you can get other than Lyme disease?
So there is another disease. You may remember right at the beginning, I said there's a bug called anaplasma. It's much less common, but that they also transmit. There's one or two other things they also do transmit as well, but not typically here. Where do the ticks? So that's a good question. Where do the ticks survive the winter? They survive the winter under the snow. The snow actually acts as an insulation blanket. And they'll typically be right at the base of the grass. But once the temperatures, so at this time of the year, and things are going to change any day now, because once the temperature goes above zero and the snow has melted, very quickly you will start seeing ticks. I don't know if you remember was it about 2 weeks ago, the temperature went up to 18 degrees. I saw, actually the secretary in my department found one deer tick on her dog that day. I haven't seen any since because it then went really cold. So I would expect certainly in the next few days to start seeing them again. And the numbers you describe on you, I'm not surprised. We take our dog for a walk in a forest every weekend, an off-leash run for an hour. And 5 years ago, you never saw more than one tick every few days on the dog. Now it's quite often you'll find 10 or more ticks. The numbers where we go have clearly increased dramatically. And I know of other areas where they're a lot more common than they are in the Guelph area.
Horses, and last year one of our horses was diagnosed with Lyme disease. So as you can imagine, it's very difficult to keep horses out of grassy areas. Ours are turned out on grass all day long. It responded very well to antibiotics, so that it presented as something similar to cholera. The veterinarian here was not surprised. She had seen a number of cases of Lyme disease. So is this something that you're also seeing, and can the horses then possibly replace the role that deer would play?
Yeah, so horses, you remember on the slide at the beginning, I indicated most people that get infected develop disease, Lyme disease. No cats do. And only about 10% of dogs that get infected develop disease. Horses seem to be even more resistant than dogs. And so only a few horses that get infected, and they clearly are fed on by many infected ticks. Only a few horses become sick, but it can be very challenging to treat in horses. And it can be a nasty disease in horses, just as it can be in people.
Do ticks attack or infect its transportation hosts like birds, as an example? You mentioned birds are carriers of ticks. And if so, what are the effects on the birds? Has there been any studies, or is there any studies studying the bird population effect on birds?
Geez, so just tell me, the question is, what's the impact of these ticks on birds?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a really good question. There haven't been many studies that have really looked at that. But the more ticks you have on a bird, the more blood feeding that's occurring. And so if it's clear in parts of North America where there's massive numbers of ticks, particularly in small young birds, large numbers of ticks feeding on blood can cause significant disease just from the blood feeding activity. I have no idea how common that is, because I think sadly a lot of very sick or dead birds we never hear about. But I think it's a very relevant, potentially practical issue.
Part of the treating the dogs, if you treat the dog and the ticks jump off the dog inside the house, that's not going to create a problem.
So I think, so am I right? The question is, are you saying to what extent could dogs bring a tick into the house and it drop off into the household? Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah, I think many of the tick products, and particularly the repellents we use on ourselves, actually cause the ticks to drop off really quickly. But certainly sometimes they may actually come into the house on our dog and fall off. The vast majority of time, once they've fallen off, they're fully engorged, so they're not going to feed again. And usually typically once they fall off indoors, they die pretty quickly because they need a certain level of humidity and temperature to survive. They typically die pretty quickly indoors. So there is a theoretical risk, but it's a really, really low risk of that happening.
Question about antibiotics. I was told that it's not all antibiotics that are effective, and it also depends on the dose. Can you comment on that?
Sorry, what was the question?
Which I've been told some antibiotics are not effective,
Oh, yeah.
and it also depends on the dose of the antibiotic, whether it will have effect.
Yeah, that's very true. So the drug class of antibiotics that's used typically in the early stages is a group of drugs called the tetracyclines. And you can use different dosages. And typically the longer the infection has gone on, either the greater number of treatments or the greater the dosages you have to use. And I know once you get severe disease, whether that's in people, dogs, or horses, you have to use higher doses of those antibiotics. Because at that point, the bacteria have got to places like joints where the concentration of antibiotics doesn't get to very high levels unless you use elevated dosages of those drugs.
Is there any other question?
You mentioned that it's best to be able to remove as much as possible of the tick and the mandibles. However, I've also heard that if you try too hard to remove them, that is by poking, then you might be driving the infection in further. So on balance, would you go for complete removal where you probably have to use a needle or something like that? Or would you just leave them in?
So I think the bottom line is don't go digging in your skin.
Okay.
I mean, more than anything, because the more digging you do, the greater the chance you're going to make things worse, primarily by introducing more bacteria by sticking that needle in. Our bodies are very good at getting foreign material out of skin. So for instance, if you leave, the best thing is if you can't get everything out, either go to your physician or public health folks to pull what they can out. And if that doesn't come out, typically within a few days, within about a maximum of a week, a pus forms around it, an abscess forms, and everything will discharge onto the skin. I realize that feels a little gross, but it's actually... Sorry, I hope no one's passed out with that description. But we're very good at getting foreign bodies out of our skin, particularly small little things.
You've also heard that people who've had tick bites have them removed, but 5-8 months later, they still have the actual spot and it's itchy. And it can be irritating.
So I can't comment on that. I'm a vet. The one species I don't deal with is humans on a day-to-day basis. So I'm sorry. Please go ask your physician, your public health folks. That's not something we see in dogs or horses.
And when that's so, thank you very much for all your wonderful information. It really is extremely helpful because we are in tick country here.
Oh, I know. I remember being in Napanee about a few years ago and people describing vast numbers of ticks then.
Any other question? One comment. Yeah.
Just one comment, that was by far the best presentation on ticks or anything I've seen in a long time. Your slides were all easily comprehensible. We could actually read them. The printing on it was large enough. And you explained things brilliantly as you went, so congratulations, that was a really good,
Well, please thank Marina because she saved me.
Marina.
Yes.
Yes.
Hey, Matt, you're on.
All right, thank you, Dr. Peregrine. That was an excellent presentation.
You're welcome. Okay.
There's a lot of stuff on there I didn't know. Oh, we got another question on Zoom. Are tick eggs visible? Example as in like egg masses.
They're really, really small. You would really struggle to see them with your eyes.
Okay, last chance for questions? All good? Well,
I'm
thank you
happy-
again, Dr.
You're welcome.
Peregrine.
If you want me to send my slides, Marina, I'm welcome to pass them on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, well, thanks again for the presentation. That was awesome. I work every day in the county forest where there's lots of ticks, and there's a lot of info in this presentation that I did not know. So thank you very much again. All right, guys, just some closing remarks. Please note that our next meeting is actually on May 1st. It's the April meeting, but it'll be on May 1st for that one. So the presenter is Erica Knoll on the topic of songbirds in a dangerous time, and she'll be presenting in person. Erica Knoll is actually one of my professors at Trent University, and she's a great speaker. So,
Sorry, folks, could we just have attention just for one more minute, please? Thanks.
and then heads up, the following meeting on May 29th will be our annual member photography showcase. So if you'd like to participate, start looking through your photos and send 5 photos of anything within the county, Northumberland County, and send 5 photos to your email, Marina, to the info at Willow Beach.
An email coming out with the.
Oh, okay. Yes, more info will be shared later in April. So please, if you're interested in that, keep your eyes open. And outings that are on the horizon. So April 22nd again is that Earth Day cleanup at Wesleyville. If you'd like to participate, please contact Jenny Jackman or email the general mailbox. And we will be scheduling a nature walk in April. Watch your emails for the details on that one. I don't think we have a date yet. So that's it. Thanks everyone for coming.
Generally,